Welcome everyone who's listening to us to our session on getting your developers' builds ready and avoiding some common learning program pitfalls.
The mouthful.
Can't speak, yes. We understand that Appian is a big investment, and you want to grow a team of skilled Appian developers as quickly as possible so you can start seeing the value of Appian. In this session, we're going to talk about key attributes of a good learning program, some common pitfalls you will want to avoid, and the resources that we offer to help you get started quickly. We've assembled these recommendations and pitfalls, not just from our own heads. We got customer responses from surveys, had conversations with our partners, and of course, our very own customer success. So my name is Janine Signorelli. I'm Senior Director of Product Enablement here at Appian. If anyone was at Dev Day yesterday, I see some familiar faces. We were at the keynote yesterday, and I've been with the team for about 2 years. Before this, I worked for Oracle for a lot of time. I've worked in technical training and documentation for almost my entire career, and I'm not going to tell you how long that was. I have a master's in technical communication from RPI, and I'm finishing my master's in education from the University of Florida currently.
And I'm Kara. I'm Director of Training Development here at Appian. Janine and I are on the same team, and I oversee our training development team who builds a lot of online training resources like Academy Online and our community YouTube channel, if anybody's familiar with those, and a few others. And I've been at Appian for over 10 years, which has been a great experience. So hopefully between my experience with Appian and Janine's extensive experience with technical education, we're going to give you some valuable tips and tricks here for your learning programs and getting them started or streamlining them, whatever the case may be. So before we dig into some of kind of the meat and potatoes of your program and what content resources it's made up of and how it's structured, I want to start with kind of like the mental model of your learning program and how to kick that off. I think that the mindset when you're creating and designing your program is really important, because when you think about onboarding or training or getting people up to speed on pretty much anything, you think of, okay, we have a set timeline here, right? Because we got to get people billable, we got to get them on the job. But with technology and software, that's really hard. It's hard to put it in a box and say there's a defined start date and a defined end date, because the truth is that technology is ever changing. So learning is ongoing, right? It's continuous. And you have to be okay with that, both from an employee perspective as well as a program designer or manager. So we think about training as starting with, training. And then probably certification, and then they're going to get some project work. But that's just kind of the first cycle or iteration, right? And then it just, rinse, repeat. So that's where we feel like, and I feel like, it's really important that you take on this kind of growth mindset, which espouses continuous learning and development. Is anyone here familiar with a growth mindset?
Okay,
good. Yeah, a good number of you. That's awesome. A growth mindset, I think, teaches us to embrace this idea and get comfortable with it. The concept was coined by Carol Dweck, and in her book she said, mindsets are more important than technology. Without the management mindset of enablement, the methodologies and practices achieve nothing. And what I take that to mean is that without this embracing, I keep saying this, but continuous learning and development, your strategies, your processes, they just become obsolete really quickly. You've got to constantly be renewing them and changing them, especially in technology. So you got to start with this mental model first, and you've got to teach your new employees when you hire them, because not everyone thinks this way, to embrace certain behaviors and attitudes. I know this picture is really small, but and I apologize for that, but we got it off the web. It's not ours. I have to give credit to Carol. But what you want your employees to do to demonstrate continuous development, this growth mindset, is embrace challenges. I'll read them off for you. Persist in the face of setbacks. See effort as the path to mastery, not just intelligence. Receive feedback and criticism and use them as tools to grow and find lessons and inspiration in the success of others. And by the way, these are not behaviors that you learn overnight, right? These can take a lifetime to learn, but the fact is that you understand that they're important to grasp. So when you're designing your programs, not only do you want to set this framework out, but you also want to establish ways for new employees to demonstrate and then reinforce these behaviors over time and throughout their career with software development and Appian in particular. Once you have that mental model in place, then you can move on to the structure and content of your learning program, which includes, we hope, and are going to try to persuade you, a 360 learning experience, a structured and supportive pathway for your employees, plenty of guidance and feedback along the way, and then an emphasis on keeping current. So we're just going to dive a little bit deeper into each one of these in the next segments.
So now that your teams have the right mindset, because I know they will after this session, it's time to talk about the program components. Modern learning happens using a variety of different resources, formats, and experiences, which brings us to pitfall number 1. Learning should never be one-dimensional. Think back to when you were in school, maybe algebra. Did your teacher just stand in front of you and lecture? I mean, I don't remember any of my algebra, to be quite honest, but they didn't. They coupled that with homework. Who remembers all the math homework we got when we were in school? Projects, tests, discussions, questions and answers, and many other teaching strategies. All of these other things helped you understand and retain what was being taught and tried to make it a little less boring, but I don't know if you can do that with algebra. You need to do the same thing for your developers. You can't stick them at a desk and tell them to go through the online curriculum and expect them to be successful. Leaning into a variety of resources and experiences, both Appian built and company specific, creates a more engaging and enriching experience. And we call this dynamic learning approach 360 learning. So we're going to have a lot of quotes. Benjamin Franklin said, "Tell me and I forget, teach me and I may remember, involve me and I learn." When you're thinking about how to create a dynamic learning program, make sure it includes elements that allow new developers to learn, obviously, practice, but also participate. Obviously, the first step is to learn the key concepts, processes, and features, why they're valuable, how they work. And our resources are meant to help new developers learn this critical information as they get project ready. This learning journey here is sort of a roadmap of how to leverage the various Appian learning resources for your learning programs. And we included, I hope we're going to find out, we uploaded this learning journey to your app, to your Appian app, so you can download it and use it later. Our Appian Developer Online curriculum, or even our Applied Developer Instructor-led courses, are the perfect starting point for your new developers. And an ideal learning experience for new developers is to enroll in one of our Applied Developer courses because it uses our online developer curriculum as a starting point and then incorporates solving real business problems in a learning cohort or a group of other learners, right, with the support of one of our amazing Appian instructors. This helps create a more dynamic experience, obviously, but it also ensures the more complex topics are really understood because they have the opportunity to ask the instructor more questions. The purpose of these Appian resources is so you don't have to build them. Of course, you should sprinkle in some company resources, right, to augment the curriculum with your own specific use cases and best practices. But we have a big team of instructional designers to build this so that you guys don't have to. And Aristotle said, what we have to learn to do, we learn by doing. And he's considered pretty smart, I think. So that brings us to the idea of practicing what you're taught. Obviously, in instructor-led training, learners don't have a choice but to practice, right? The teacher is there walking them through hands-on sessions. But when you put a developer in an online course, they're only accountable to themselves, really. And some learners just watch the videos and go through and don't really complete the exercises. You can't learn Appian without building apps. So after the guided exercises, either online or in class, it's really important that learners challenge themselves with a practice project. And we think this is critical to their success. And many of our partner orgs had built learning projects for their new developers. So of course we stole that idea and created an online course called Build an IT Application, where developers can actually go in and follow a use case and build an entire application. Our Applied Developer course also does that. They work through an entire use case and build a project. So in either delivery format, a project challenges developers to take a step towards independence, because we know Appian's tough, by building their own application. So we talked about this a little bit yesterday, if you were here, but all developers are going to have access to a free practice environment of Appian called the Appian Community Edition. And I know those familiar with it, we've had some struggles with it this year, but as we said yesterday, starting with 24.2, we're going to have a whole new environment, and everyone who wants access to it will get access to it for free and for however long they need it, which is great. Thank you. Yay, I know. We've seen the Reddit posts. Developers who simply watch the videos and complete the courses without completing exercises or incorporating a project end up not being project ready and don't understand the full scope of Appian and can't pass the certification test if that's one of your organization's goals.
Or even sometimes, I'm sorry to interrupt you,
Yeah, go ahead,
Janine.
just interrupt.
Sometimes they pass the certification test and they get to a project and they're not ready because they didn't have enough practice and reinforcement from, actually doing, right? And they think that, and we've seen this, right? That people go through, I completed the online curriculum. Well, did you do the exercises associated with the curriculum? No, not necessarily. Did you do any type of practice or reiteration after the curriculum? No, not necessarily. So, the more practice that you can build in, the better. The test is a great qualifier of knowledge, but sometimes you encounter experiences on a project that really only, doing this and being hands-on and breaking things and then fixing them is going to really help you be successful with.
Yeah, you have to put the fingers on the keyboard to really be a success. So after they learn the concepts and have practiced, really now they need to engage with other developers. And that's a critical component of their learning journey. And there's tons of different types of engagement. But one thing that we see a lot is new developers get partnered with a mentor or a more seasoned mentor or a buddy or even a manager to encourage that conversation while they're working through the curriculum. Whether it's in a class or working on your own, in both cases, we strongly encourage new developers to join the Appian community discussions. I mean, some of the folks that post in Appian community discussions have been doing it for years, are so smart, have encountered multiple types of problems and know how to solve them. So it's a great way to learn from your other developers. And it's going to increase their retention and ability to develop applications.
Yeah. So once you have kind of some of the key resources that you're going to leverage in place, and hopefully that's a variety of resources, we do still encourage that you support new employees and developers with a very structured path. So let's talk a little bit about what that means. So as program managers, program designers, and leaders, very often we've got big goals. Our big goals, we got to hire a team, we got to get them trained, hopefully, we got to get them certified, and certainly we got to get them working on a project. But those goals, if you stop there, they're good goals to have, but they're not necessarily what your developers and employees need to be successful. In order for them to be successful, we got to break this down into much more achievable goals. So pitfall number 2, don't conflate program goals with learning goals. Learning goals are small, they're bite-sized. If you all are familiar with SMART goals, Very similar, right? We want to make them small, achievable, measurable, all that good stuff. Here's an example. So record types. Hopefully everybody at some point during this conference has heard the term record or maybe is intimately familiar with record types, so one or the other. At some point very early on in a developer's career or learning, they're going to encounter record types, right? Well, they need to know about them. What do they need to know about them? Most likely they need to know what a record is conceptually, what it means to a business user, and then of course how to configure it. What are all the different elements of a record type in an application in the design view? How does data flow between it? So these are different goals that we want to make clear. These new developers need to be successful. They need to know how to do all that stuff. Once you have the goals made clear, you need to connect them to resources, right? How are they going to get there? How are they going to learn all this stuff? Now, again, as Janine mentioned earlier, and we'll continue to reinforce, we have some of these materials available, right? So to learn the concepts, to learn the process, to learn how to configure, complete modules 4 through 6 of our online developer curriculum and Academy Online. It's free. You can go in and do that. However, you all may supplement that with additional learning resources. Maybe they should also go through a live stream or some type of in-house presentation that your org has built or facilitated. I'm not telling you to throw the kitchen sink of resources at your developers and overwhelm them, but be thoughtful and intentional about giving them a variety of resources that are going to keep them engaged and give them kind of a broad perspective here. Now, one of the most important things that you all can do as organizations and leaders and supporters of your new developers is checkpoint their knowledge, especially if you're leveraging an online learning path, but even if you're doing an instructor-led or both or combination, you should verify and knowledge check that they are where you want them to be, right? Don't assume that they are because, well, I'll leave this. I will talk more about the dangers of that. But you need to, after you give them the goals, give them the resources, you need to find increments and stopping points to check in with them and make sure that they have the knowledge and skill ability that you would expect based on where they are in their learning.
And to give them those small wins so that they don't feel like they just have this entire 40-hour or big learning program. They're like, oh, I know how to do this. I know how to do this.
Totally, yeah. I mean, Appian, I think we have like rose-colored glasses on sometimes because, you know, learning new things is hard, and particularly new software. And so to give them confidence is really important. So check in with them, make sure they're where they're at. It's not just for improving, but also for boosting them up. Absolutely. So we have these resources online. I'm sure what you're thinking, looking at that previous slide in terms of this template, identifying all those very granular goals, it's a lot of work. I get it. And again, we've done a lot of the work for you. What we are trying to promote, if you even go to the next slide, is that we want you all to integrate the curriculum, the content that we've built with your own resources to make sure that they're getting this 360 experience. In fact, what we really recommend is that you create a template, an onboarding template if you don't already have one, that includes at least some goals, learning goals, and then you can sprinkle in activities, pairing sessions, opportunities for reinforcement and discussion, and then of course those knowledge checkpoints to verify and assess that they are where that you expect them to be. We created a little getting started template to share with you all that includes already some of those like the curriculum, you know, we have online has a lot of these learning goals already in it. So we basically took those out of the curriculum, put them in an Excel spreadsheet so that you can modify and then add additional activities, which we also suggested a few for you as well. Mm-hmm. Hopefully this is in the app, but if it's not in the app, if you can't find it, then, oh.
Yes?
Oh, okay, great.
Awesome. Great.
Yeah.
We weren't sure. We couldn't see it.
Yeah.
So obviously we've mentioned this a lot, but a new developer can effectively learn all by themselves, right? Throughout their learning journey, they need guardrails so they don't crash, and they need direction so they're continuously moving in the right direction. And so we recommend, obviously, that you pair new developers with more seasoned mentors or buddies. So now we're going to get into a little bit more detail around that. So this person is meant to give the developer guidance and feedback. So as they proceed through the curriculum, they're not turning left when they should be turning right. They're not only there to answer questions, but these mentors should be able to identify, should be so in touch with the new developer that they should be able to identify if they're getting frustrated, if they're going down the wrong path, if they're losing motivation, which happens a lot too, and be able to provide support. The time spent by this person is ultimately going to save you money by avoiding the spinning wheels factor that a new developer would run into. And since this mentor probably has been through exactly what that person is going through, they really have a keen sense of how to help them. They know where they had trouble. So they can be like, oh my God, expressions, I get it. It's really hard. Here's what I did. So this brings us to pitfall number 3. Don't assume that the developers know what to ask. It's human nature not to want to ask questions when you're learning something new so you don't look stupid. When I first joined Appian, even coming from Oracle, I kept a notebook when I was in meetings of all the acronyms that I had no idea what the heck they were talking about, because we have a lot of acronyms, and even the new technology for me, because I didn't want to ask a question in a big meeting and be like, oh, what's that? What's that? So I just kept it in a little journal. So it's really important to create that environment where it's safe to not only ask questions, but also so that the mentor is questioning them as well, like after a meeting or after a module. So, what do you think about this? And where are you going with that? Because the developers might not come with questions. They might be like, oh yeah, I got it. I did all the exercise. Everything's great. I know what I'm doing. So much of learning Appian is through experience, and the old adage is never more true. You don't know what you don't know. Most new developers think they're doing great. I know when I was going through Academy, I thought I was doing great. I completed the curriculum, I was doing the activities, but sometimes it's hard to see the forest for the trees. How I know Appian now after 2 years versus how I knew it after Academy is something completely different. So new developers may not come to check-ins with questions specific to individual components they're learning about. That's why it's important for the mentor to challenge new developers with questions that stretch their basic understanding of the components and then help them stitch them all together to see that forest that is the Appian platform. And mentors should dig deeper into the new developers' understanding of these topics. You could present like small problems for them to solve after they've completed. Maybe present them with one of your own business problems that are meant to be solved and ask them, how would you solve this? Prompt them with reflective questions and on what they're learning. And I personally suggest giving them a journal, because then they don't have to feel stupid in meetings and not know what anyone's talking about like I did. And you can, whenever I had my one-on-one with my manager, I said, okay, in that meeting with the 15 other people, here's the 25 acronyms I didn't understand. Can you explain them to me? So it gives you an opportunity to have more discussion topics. So mentors should design. It shouldn't just be a passive participation. They should really engage and design in regular knowledge checks with the developers. It's going to help reinforce the concepts, make them feel more comfortable, spark new ideas, and it'll give them the opportunity to assess their ability and how they're doing in the curriculum. It can take multiple shapes. You can have them do demo the activity you did in module 6, or, walk me through how you approached this. Tell me what you wrote in your journal. You could even give them a quiz or assessment if you make it up. You can either find other fun games online to make it interesting.
Okay, so one of the hardest things about software development, I mentioned this earlier, or learning software, is staying up to date on it. And I think the reason is generally learning is difficult. It's difficult to get away from your everyday, right? And learning new things is this kind of arduous and time consuming, and nobody wants to take the time. But it's actually really important, especially in technology, that we stay up to date. I was thinking it's actually kind of like AI, you know, I mean, to a greater or lesser extent, we all agree AI is going to change the world somehow, somewhere. But, you know, where and how? Well, it's hard to know that unless you know about the technology and what value it provides and what use cases it's most adept at. And only with that level of understanding can you actually apply it.
Not to mention, you were in the general session. We release a lot of new awesome features that are going to help them do their work better. So they need to keep updated on it.
Exactly. So pitfall number 4, and we've heard this over and over again. And to be honest, it even used to be something that we struggled with at Appian. And we've somewhat recently made a big pivot to make sure this is no longer the case. They don't need to know it yet. So there's no point in learning it now, right? But that's absolutely not true. Developers need to know what's in their toolbox in order for them to be effective, or they're going to miss opportunities to apply better, more modern technology to problem solve more efficiently. Now, we got to be realistic here, right? We're not asking for new developers to learn everything there is to know about a new feature when it's released. If I ask someone, any developer, an experienced developer, to learn how to configure a robotic task, and they don't use robotic tasks for 6 months, well, that's a waste of time, right? Because in 6 months from now, configuring a robotic task may be different, if they even remember how to do it at all. That's not the level of learning that we're expecting here. It's a higher level of learning. It's an awareness factor. What is the feature? What's the value of the feature? And what are some key use cases where it can be applied? And also remember, you want to keep this goal, all learning goals, achievable, which means that you want to kind of make them concise and minimize the time, since we all know this is not their main job. Hopefully we make this easy. I want to make sure that you all are aware of a few resources that we use to keep Appian developers up to speed as quickly as we can on just the bare necessities here. First of all, we have the release showcase. So this is like a online training course that we release each quarter. It's 30 minutes, give or take a few minutes, but about 30 minutes once a quarter. Every certified developer is required to take this to maintain their certification. So we're trying to prompt engagement. We also have a release webinar from our product strategy team, and of course, the ever popular release notes.
And just so you know, our customer success employees do all of these every single quarter. They're required to. So even they obviously have to keep up to date on every little new feature that we release.
And hopefully everybody knows about the community YouTube channel. This is another way that we try to just get awareness out there about new features, but it's a great way to find bite-sized learning on specific features too if someone needs something in a pinch.
Yeah. Also, we forgot to mention in Appian Community Edition, there's in-product learning. Every quarter when we release that, we'll have help built into the community edition, highlighting specific features that we think developers need to know about. And that's really helpful as well. We talked about it a little bit yesterday, but we didn't even include it in here. So I think seeing the features in the product and then being able to go play with them is a great way to keep updated. Sorry.
That's okay. So don't forget about the habit loop here, right? As leaders and program designers, you need to come up with ways to drive, or hopefully you do, drive and incentivize your employees to keep up with learning. And that means maybe recognizing certain employees who are consistently ahead of the knowledge curve and applying new technology to new use cases, right? Or maybe a badging program or some other way of acknowledging that this is a good use of time. At Appian, we have something called learning time. So 5% of a developer's time is set aside for learning new technology that's necessary for their jobs or to make them better at what they do. So we try to leave that space. We badge people for completing things like the release showcase, and then we recognize them through different value awards. Okay, so summary. This is the last couple slides. I know we're about out of time. Please try to engage your learners with a 360 dynamic learning experience. Don't just set them on one path and, kind of like take your hands off the wheel there. We want to think about all the approaches and a broad perspective, or take a broad perspective on learning. Once you have the key resources that you really feel like are valuable, make sure that they're sequenced and structured in such a way that a developer can follow along and that their goals are achievable so that they have stopping points that they can then check themselves and see, are they on the right track, or do they need supplemental and additional support. Provide feedback throughout, and remember, don't just wait for questions to come to you all. They probably won't. We need to make sure that mentors are in place to ask the questions and get the information out. And then lastly, as best you can, find opportunities and ways to create a culture of continuous learning and development.
So I hate when I go to sessions and they give me all this great information and then I don't know what to do with it. Like, okay, what do I do next? So I like to just go through these next steps. Here's what you can do. Go up to that learning program template that is on the app and look through it. We have a great structure and a flow. We have some sample learning objectives, as Kara mentioned. There's also a tab in there for all of our other resources that we have, and then personalize it for each of your new developers. So hopefully that'll give you a jump start. Important to identify your organization's goals. Do we want to have our developers project ready but with support within 6 months, or do I need this person on this project by a certain time? What do we need to do to get them there? And then start structuring that. Identify how you're going to include that practice, especially org-specific practice, letting them understand what your company's business problems are or your customer's business problems are. And then start personalizing that learning template for each developer. Just keep using it over and over, but each person's going to have a slightly different template based on what they need to do. And obviously leverage our resources. That's why we're here. And get on your way. And here are the resources, but you can go to community and that's going to get you to everything. I'm not going to go through everything, but if you get to community, it'll have all that stuff in there. So thank you. I'm so glad that we're the last ones finishing because we were so worried we were going to be short. So I'm excited about that. Thank you for investing your time into helping your developers be successful. Here are our email addresses. We love to get email from folks. You're welcome to, and we're also available for questions here afterwards.
Thank you so much for coming. I
much.
appreciate your time.